Hey everyone, John here with Paddles Up Media. I want to talk to you today about something that is very interesting. It can be complicated. It's definitely affected millions of people worldwide. And that is why I left the institution of church, specifically religion. And I'm going to explain that. So let's dive right in. For years, I grew up in a setting where we would go to church once in a while. From the Oregon area originally, born in California, but moved up to Oregon at a pretty young age. And all throughout my childhood and into my teen years, it was a situation where my parents had a foundation with church life and God, but it was just once in a while. We would go to church on holidays or when we felt bad about ourselves, basically. And we just wanted to go to kind of smooth things over, if you will. Now, I know that wasn't the intention, but subconsciously it was. And a lot of people do that. They go to Easter Sunday, they go to church on those major holidays, depending on what denomination you're a part of. And then it makes the soul or the conscious feel better. And then we go back about our day. We just kind of go do our thing. And then we come back when we want to do some repenting, right? And so that was kind of my life. Did the party thing all throughout my teen years, went into the military and certainly cried out to God a lot. I said, God, if you're there, please answer. Anytime that I was in need, like Jelly Roll's song, I only talk to God when I need a savior, kind of thing. And it was the typical kind of religious setting that I had in my mindset of talking to God when I was in trouble. And it wasn't a real relational kind of thing. But then something happened years later when I got into a jam. I was really involved in some things that I shouldn't have been, and that's for another video. But basically, I had this radical encounter with God. And it's because I was at the end of my rope. Somebody stole my car. I was out partying. I was with somebody I shouldn't have been with. And, it was one of those scenarios where it freaked everybody out, my family for sure, because they didn't know if it was me that was, the cops were chasing this person that was in the car. They didn't know if it was me doing that. But it was certainly, the car was stolen. They were firing at the police with a gun I had underneath the seat. It was a revolver that I just kept underneath there, kept it loaded. And, when you're engaged in that lifestyle, you're in fear. So I just really came to the realization that, wait a minute, if I keep going down this path, something is going to happen like bad. And I don't want that to take place, obviously, and neither did my family. So we have this moral kind of foundation, right? But like I mentioned earlier, it's just go to church whenever, once in a while. And then when I started having these events happen in my life, I started seeing the signs and the writing on the wall. And I was like, wait a minute, I've got to make a change here. I've got to see if God is for real, while in the midst of saying, okay, well, if he's not answering, then there's a reason why he's not answering. Maybe I need to position myself in more of a surrender so that I can hear. And sure enough, it was like when I finally said, I relent, I give up, I give, then this presence surrounded me in my car that is just unexplainable. This presence of love that was just all consuming. And I just began to radically change from there. Just fell in love with this God of love. And it wasn't religious. It was just this reality of, wait a minute, God is real, because my car is flooding with the presence of love. And I felt grace and peace and just a belonging, a sense of forgiveness, and just radically changing the way I believed before, because I knew this was tangible. It was so thick you could cut it with a knife, kind of thing. And from that moment on, I seemed to just want to radically change everything. I gave away all my stuff, and I mean, I went pretty extreme on this. So I gave away all my clothes. I gave away all my goods. I was just like, I don't care about these earthly possessions anymore, and I just went out all in. I was all in. And then I just devoured like Christian television, and I was like devouring anything religious I could. I was going to churches, different churches, to one felt right, but it never did. It never did. And years later, I look back and see why. But during the time that I was involved, I was like, I'd go to one church, I'd learn a little bit, and it was great to meet other people that believe the same way. But then I'd go to another one, and it was just like, well, this doesn't really do it for me. And then I go to another one. Little did I know I was being led to have another piece added to the puzzle, so to speak, in my life. It was another truth. It was another element. It was another side, another facet of God. It was like a multi-faceted diamond. And I was tasting one little snippet of who this God was in each church or denomination that I went to. And then I finally, years into it, I finally settled down, so to speak, in the charismatic prophetic kind of world, because it fit my personality more and the gifts that I hold true today. And I just began to realize that, wait a minute, there's something here that really ignites in me. And I started seeing miracles happen, and legitimate ones. Yes, I've seen the fake ones, but legitimate stuff happened to me. Legitimate stuff happened around me. And I was like, whoa, that's unexplainable. I can't explain that other than that's God. And so, there was times that I really enjoyed it, but other times it was just this, initially I couldn't put my finger on it. I'm like, why is it so constricting and so binding, being underneath of this ceiling called religion, if you want to look at it as a banner called religion? And I didn't really understand at the time, although I knew that my heart was being protected in the midst of it all. So my wife and I, when I met my wife years later, and we've been married 23 years as of the date of this video, that was miraculous how I met her too, which will be another message, another video. But when we met, we linked up, and then we started getting heavily involved, even more so. Prior to me meeting her, I was already doing the preaching thing. I was giving messages. I was sharing. We were seeing miracles happen and all of that. And then I met her, and then we just ramped it up another notch in ministry, because after all, we loved God and we just wanted to, quote, work with him or for him. And so we got involved in different arenas of ministry. We did some pastoring. We did some, leaders of prophetic ministry, leaders of prayer groups. We were really involved with the whole church world for a long time. And then we were meeting great people and connecting and having great relationships. And then at different times, we would just be expressing ourselves and revealing who we were without agenda. And I believe that to this day, that, even though you make mistakes, even though you're still maturing and you're growing, if your heart's right, if you keep your heart right, then you're not in it for the wrong reasons. And I don't believe that Amy and I have ever been in it for the wrong reasons. And I'll explain what happens when you have the right heart, and then other people either get jealous or they don't understand really who they are, and they're operating out of the egoic spirituality or spiritual ego, and then how that affects the people around them that are in it with a pure heart, And again, it's not as if we didn't have our flaws. Still to this day, we are expanding, we're maturing, we're growing just like everybody else. However, when you go in with a right heart in any institution, whether it's the workplace or it's the church world or a synagogue or something of that nature, any kind of religion, and you go in with the right heart, you're going to encounter problems because people are there. But even more so because a religious spirit is one of the most powerful entities that will stake its claim, because after all, it's godlike. Remember, I said godlike. Now, in reference to that, remember, if you've read the Bible at all, I don't know who's watching this, but if you have or haven't, it doesn't matter. There's a story in the Bible about the Pharisees and Jesus encountering the Pharisees quite a bit. The Pharisees were the keepers of the law, and they were the watchmen of the Torah and the law of Moses. And so they were heavily, heavily studied. And you know this today, if you're Jewish or you've been in Israel or the Jewish community, you understand that that's what goes on. There's just countless hours of studying Torah and the Midrash, and they would go in and they would just study out the law and the prophets, and still do today. So when Jesus encountered them, he was the new age to the old age system, or the institution of the old wineskin, if you will. Now, wineskin is something they carried around with them back in the day, where they would keep their water, keep other elements in it, and it would keep the fluid or the liquid in such a way to where it wouldn't spoil, if you will. And that's what they would use, is wineskin. So when he's talking about wineskins, an old wineskin, if you put new wine into the old wineskin, it'll burst. It'll just, it won't take the capacity, because it was used to the old. And so when Jesus is addressing the old wineskin and the Pharisees, it's like they didn't understand that he was the new wine coming to fill them with love, to fill their wineskin, their vessel, their selves with love by his teachings and his presence and his atmosphere. And so, you know, whenever somebody comes in with a pure heart like that into a established institution, no matter if it's religion or the workplace, you're going to disrupt some folks. It's just the way it is. And the more you come in without agenda, the more pure your presence is, and the God in you will emanate out and begin to ruffle some feathers, so to speak, that will begin to disrupt the status quo in the system. So Jesus was certainly that figure, and still is today. Goes in, says, look, you don't even know, you study the scriptures over and over, you pour through them, but you don't realize that love embodied is standing right in front of you. You're missing something here. You're thinking that I'm a false prophet coming in and bringing another religion or another way, but I'm coming in to actually reveal to you, this is who you've been studying about. I am the Christ. I am the Messiah standing right in front of you. Now, he didn't do this arrogantly, but he certainly love confronts, whether we like it or not. It will confront and enlighten or cast a light over the dark, shadowy things that we hold on to. It just does. When light comes in, it disperses darkness. And darkness can mean many things. It can mean that I am so entrenched in an institution that I'm blind. I'm a blind leading the blind, like Jesus addressed Pharisees, you're blind guides leading the blind. It can mean I am so stuck in my ways that I can't see clearly anymore to see that I am ever expanding and ever growing, because I'm a multidimensional being. I am an eternal being, whether I realize that or not. And I'm going to live forever. And so there's always growth. There's always learning. There's always expansion. There's always a higher level of awakening inside of us, no matter what. And so when that light walks into any atmosphere, it's going to disrupt some things. So I am saying all that to say that anyone, not just myself and my wife, when you walk into any room, and it doesn't mean that you're better than anyone else. I want to make this clear. We've never carried that heart knowingly. Okay. There may be some blind spots and things that we all have, but knowingly, we never really carried this heart of, hey, I'm better than you. That was what I did in the world when I just did my thing, when I was just acting crazy and all that. And even then, I didn't place myself as a bully or better than anyone else. At least I tried not to. I was always sticking up for the weaker person, or the one that seemingly was weaker, the one that was being bullied, in other words. So when you walk into and you become a part of an institution, just know this. And some of you really realize this because you're still involved and the institution of church. I want to keep this clear. There's the church, which means it's a body of people that are lovers in a community, and they believe in the same God, or they believe in the same faith belief system, however you want to say it, the same theology, kind of, and they are centered around a faith. And then there's the institution of faith, or institution of religion. Keeping the two separate and keeping in mind that we firmly believe in community. Amen. I believe in community. No matter what your faith may be, no matter what your denomination may be, community is always better off when people are loving one another. However, if it's completely dysfunctional and you have a bunch of people in there that are wounded, which we all are to a degree, and they are in there jockeying for position and title and approval and belonging and love and all of those things, then it forms an institution. It's no longer a living, moving organism called a family, or in Greek terms, it would be ecclesia, which is a governing body of people that really govern with love. And so the institution becomes an institution when there's somebody or several people at the helm that want to keep the reins of control tight, because it's more like an institution of business than it is a living, moving family, growing and living and nurturing one another. The Bible's very clear about leaders nurturing those that they are leading or those that they're influencing. Very clear. And really that is the 9 fruit of the Spirit. So 9 fruit of the Spirit they're all elements of nurturing and compassion and love and care. So that's really who Christ is. Okay? Christ is not religious. He never was religious. He's not religious. Again, he was the new entire complete era coming into an old era and saying, I'm the completion that you've been looking for. I am the love that you've been trying to study about, but you're missing me clearly because I'm coming in riding on a donkey, lowly and humble, and not a Learjet, like you position yourself to live in that paradigm and your loftiness. In other words, he was telling the Pharisees this. And so comes in lowly and humble, compassionate, flooded with love, because he's the embodiment of unconditional love, comes in, and they try to make him religious. They try to get him to conform, and they try to make him uniform according to their codes and their rules and their laws and their doctrines. But then he says stuff like, look, your traditions have rendered love in none effect. It means your traditions keep people from really loving unconditionally. In other words, just to rephrase it. In many ways to look at it, but it's just how I look at it. And so the institution is different than a family of people that gather, that love one another, encourage one another, empower one another, champion one another, love on one another into complete wholeness and healing. Now, if I ask that question, like, if you had a community of people like that, would you see anything wrong with it? Of course you wouldn't. You might not. You may be an atheist watching this, and you may not agree that there even is a God, but how about a community of people that come together and empower one another, encourage one another, love one another, champion one another, heal one another? If I just said it that way, it's more than likely, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but more than likely you'd say, I love that. I would be a part of that. Well, there you go. That's Jesus. That's him. Okay. That's what he stood for. That's what he walked in and still does in spirit today. And so I don't see anybody arguing with that, and if they do, then they just don't want community, and for whatever reason, and that's okay too. It's never been, and it will never be about judgment. Unconditional love is unconditional love. It's not about judgment. Besides, we don't know how to discern through judging anything in our frailty. I'll just say it that way. We're just not mature enough. We think we are, but I've come to realize anyone I've met, anyway, I've watched countless videos, I've watched countless scenarios, I've met a lot of people in my life, and I haven't really encountered anyone yet that knows how to judge someone the way unconditional love would judge it. You know what I'm saying? So we're still growing, we're learning, we're expanding, we're awakening, and that's a beautiful thing. So this came to a head in my life and my wife's life, back in 2003. And we just had enough of the institution. We were just like, this isn't working. There has to be something else. There has to be something different, because this isn't working. This is just killing us. Literally, it's like my wife was really close to having a nervous breakdown, because it's like when I watched her and then what she described to me, I was like, yeah, you were having a nervous breakdown. It's like your nervous system was just going haywire. So was mine. It's just mine was just kind of manifested a little differently. Certainly panic attacks and lots of stress. And the reason that was happening is because we were being used for our gifts. My wife and I have this unique ability to go in and to see into people's lives, and we're able to tell them prophetically what's happening a lot of times. Maybe not every detail, but we could look at someone and prophetically discern, hey, this is where you've been, this is where you're at, this is where you're going, kind of thing, and then know some secrets that they were just we would have no way of knowing other than it was the Christ in us saying those things. And so it's called a prophetic gift. Other people call it other terms, but that's what it's called in the church world. Some believe in it, some don't. That's okay. But we certainly operated in that, still do today, but we don't do it religiously anymore, thankfully. We do it from a place of love, and then we just tell somebody, hey, have you ever thought about this? Or, hey, this is what I see in you. Or, hey, I see you playing the guitar, and you play the guitar. Like, whoa, how'd you know that? Kind of thing. But we were we felt like we were being used. And then when we wouldn't come in alignment with that, when we felt like it was really going overboard and being used, then we would stand up and say something. This is just one side of things, guys. Then it wouldn't be taken very well, because after all, I'm the pastor here, I'm the apostle here, I'm the prophet here, or whatever, bishop, whatever you want to call it, would say, this is my house, and you're gonna submit and do what I say, kind of thing, because after all, it's God speaking through me to tell you that. I even had someone go as far as to say, if you leave this place, you're listening to lying spirits and you're in trouble with God. Do you know what that does to the human psyche when you look up to somebody? Of course you do, if you've been burned and hurt like this. It's ruined more lives than I can count. The institution of religion, the institution of church, and the egoic, immature, orphan mentality of leaders speaking things like that over people when it's not necessary. Things like calling women Jezebel because they're really wounded and traumatized, or calling guys a lot of times Absalom because they feel like their authority is being usurped and they want to take over, which may not be the case at all, but because someone's operating underneath of a Pharisaical, religious, orphan, narcissistic spirit or mentality or mindset, then they're clouded to the point to where those things just come flying out of their mouth and they don't see any recourse for it. But those words are devastating to some people. I know people that are still train wrecked today. That's happened to them 20 years ago or longer. And because they look at that like it's God himself speaking through that individual, then they think God is mad at them and they're going to fry in this eternal lake of fire. And it's just not true, guys. I'm just here to emphatically say it's not true. We don't know another individual's life like God does, and we have no business getting into the spiritual, eternal outcomes or situations or relationships in other people's lives. We have zero business getting involved in that. Now, what we can do is be a light to someone, and they can look at us and say, wow, now that's an example. And we can go like this, lead them right to the God of love, lead them right to the Christ that loves us beyond measure, as an example of character, Christ-like character, love and compassion and all that. But to go into somebody's eternal world and say you're going to go spend eternity here, or you're not. Wow. I look at that much differently now, and I wouldn't want to touch it with a 1,000,000-foot pole, because we have no idea. We have no clue and no idea. I don't care how much discernment a person has in their life. We have no idea what happens to that person after they take their last breath in this beautiful earth suit. We have no idea. You can say, well, I've sat by hospital beds hundreds of times, John, and I've watched them scream in torment. Okay, your experience is what your experience is, but you have no idea what that conversation is that goes on with Christ beyond the veil that you cannot see or discern. You don't have no idea. Neither do I. Hands off, right? Like, as we say, paddles up. Put the paddles up and let the current of God's Spirit take that over. We'd be way, way, way better off, right? It's just way beyond our pay grades. So when this was happening to Amy and I, we just said, you know what? We have got to do something. So we were crying out to God. We were praying and saying, God, the pastor, the bishop, the head grand poobah, whatever, says that we are going to be in trouble with you if we leave this place, if we leave this church, if we leave this institution. What do we do? And the amazing thing about God, he is, because he's love, the very essence, the very being of love. The amazing thing that happens is that he brings these subtle things into your life that become really big blessings. And these came to us in the form of 2 books. When this whole thing was happening, this is back in 2003, so about 20 years ago, when we were making this transition out of the institution, is we were handed 2 books. One was called Pagan Christianity by Frank Viola, and its companion, really, Who's Your Covering by Frank Viola. Pagan Christianity, if you haven't read it, wonderful book. It's about the reality and the truth of the historical context of the church and what really took place and what was still taking place today. And he lays it out so beautifully, and our eyes were completely opened to that degree then, as they were at our level of growth at that point. And we were like, whoa, we've been lied to, or maybe not intentionally by some, but yes, definitely intentionally by others to try and control us and trap us. So that was one. And then the other one was Who's Your Covering, which was huge for those that believe that you have to have a man's covering over your life. Oftentimes in the apostolic prophetic or priestly type of denominations, you will have this setup where there's this hierarchy. And can I just tell you that there's no hierarchy in the Godhead? There's no hierarchy in the Trinity. They are all equal, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, if you believe in the Trinity. Some do, some don't. But there is no hierarchy, and God does not play that role of hierarchy in his kingdom. There are different levels, different paradigm levels, different growth levels, different responsibilities, but no one's better than anyone else. That pyramidal system, hierarchical system, was created and designed by man. That was not God. We try to put it on God as if God said that this is the way it's supposed to be. Apostles first, prophets, then everybody else, right? That's a pyramid scheme. Now we honor people, right? We honor one another in love. We honor functions and roles, but we don't idolize them. We don't engrave them with graven images of idolatry. And unfortunately, that's what happens a lot in the church institutional world. And that's what's gotten us into a lot of trouble in society, in my view and my experience. If we would just love each other unconditionally, as much as we know how, we would be way, way better off and way more advanced in every shape, every form, and every way in this world. We just would be. You know that. I know that. So yeah, we were in this position to where we read these books, and Who's Your Covering was just about all that. Like, do you have to have a covering? Is there such a good thing as a covering, or is Christ your covering? Is Christ your all in all? Now, whenever you'd say this in front of a a bishop or an apostle or a pastor or a prophet and say, "Look, Christ is my covering," they go, "Oh no, oh no, buddy, oh no, buddy, oh no, 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 no. You can't have Christ as your covering. You have to have an apostle. You have to have a pastor. You have to have no, 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 no. You have to have a man over you. Otherwise, you're going to get squirrely. You're going to be a lone ranger. You're going to hit the wall. You're going to get peeled like a banana, and the devil's going to deceive you, right?" You'd hear that all the time. Whenever somebody stood up and said, "Well, wait a minute, isn't Christ my covering?" And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. You have to come submit yourself to my vision for 20, 30 years, and then we'll think about maybe giving you yours." Just complete fallacy. Now, again, I believe in serving. I believe in serving out of love. I believe in giving and generosity and exuding the love of Christ, but not at the expense of your own soul. I'll just say it that way. So, yeah, I mean, Who's Your Covering? The book is amazing. I don't even think it's print anymore if you can find it, but if you can, it's great. It's combined it into one book now called Reimagining Church by Frank Viola, so you can look those up. It's kind of combined into one. So the Who's Your Covering, yeah, it just kind of blew the lid off of the whole covering thing, and he goes line by line and he walks you through it. It's just a thin book, but walks you through what covering really means. It's a head covering, and then Christ is your spiritual covering. God and Christ, one. God of love. And so, yeah, it really interesting. It opened our eyes a lot, and so we just said, okay, we're walking out of here. And man, that didn't go well. We were confronted by the apostle. Said, if you leave here, you're deceived. You're going to hit a brick wall, and then you'll come running back. All those things. But we said, you know what? We're going to take that risk because we're dying here. We're dying on the vine in this institution. It was like, what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? This is an institution. What are you writing? This is the ecclesia. This is the governing force, governing body of God. What are you doing? You can't. Just like short circuiting, because we were his star, disciples kind of thing. And we said, sorry, we got to go. And, we tried to do as honorably as we could. And it is what it is. I haven't talked to him to this day, and that was 20 years ago. But we love him. We send love. We bless him. We tried to reach out before and just kind of nothing, no response. But that's okay. We just release him, let him go. We just love him. So, yeah. So since that time, it's been a journey. It's been a wild journey. It's been a crazy journey, but a really, really good journey. And by the way, we haven't hit a brick wall. And we haven't been listening to lying spirits, and we're more in love with Christ than we ever have been in our lives. We're more one. We're more united. We are more in love. And it's like, wow, what happened? Well, when you leave the covering of a man-made structure that keeps you small, then you begin to see how big humanity is. You begin to fall in love with humanity instead of being scared of people that don't see it the way you do. Like we're taught in religion, we're taught in the institution is to be scared of everybody that may have demons bound up in them. Be scared of darkness. Be scared of anybody that doesn't think like you or act like you or believe like you. Don't go over to that meeting because they'll deceive you. Don't go over there and talk to that gay person. Don't go over and talk to that strange Satanist over there. Don't go over there and talk to that person in New Age. Don't go over and talk to that person because, man, that stuff might jump off on you. Yeah, I mean, you need to get wiped down. You need to be prayed for. You need to be delivered every 5 seconds. You just come back over here. We'll throw the oil on your face, and then we'll pray the demons right out of you. Loose yourself off of it. Loose yourself out of them. That kind of stuff. Yeah, if you're not from the charismatic prophetic world, it gets kind of interesting. But I don't judge them. I'm just kind of making a little fun of it because that's how it is. But there was a lot of good. Okay. I don't want to make this about judging anything or pointing fingers in accusation. I'm just trying to tell my story here. okay, in the best way I know how. I'm not perfect. But I will say this is that there was a lot of loving relationships that we met. There was a lot of great people. Still is today. We're not anti church at all. In fact, we are pro community. We are pro Jesus. We are pro and for the non-religious Christ. See, and that's what we talk about a lot now, is that you have the religiously institutional picture or image of Christ, and then you have the non-institutional, non-religious Christ, who is nothing but unconditional love, who resides and takes up residence on the inside of you and I. Big contrast, big difference, right? One is about control, and one is man-made structures and doctrines and establishments, and then the other one is freedom, complete freedom. And you discover that as you grow and go. So anyway, yeah, that blew the lid off things. And then ever since then, it's been a journey, 20 years. And we've met some wonderful people. We've dipped back in. We've dipped back into the institutional world. We've gone in and we've ministered, and we've released and shared our hearts and things. But we haven't been solidly a part of any kind of institution, and we're thankful for that. We're thankful for what we learned and gleaned from all of it. But then now we're like, okay, when we meet people from around the world that are real and true and genuine, that have stepped out of that world into freedom, they genuinely love humanity, and they're living and moving and having their being in unconditional love. And the only covering they have is love. It's Christ, love, Christ in us. It's the only covering we need. And again, we honor people. We honor them where they're at. We leave them where they're at. We don't try to rescue them like we used to do. We just let them grow and go as they are at their own pace. We're all at our own pace, and we're all growing. And that's what there's long-suffering patience is for, is to really speak into the lives of anyone by reason of example. And they can see the flaws, they can see the hiccups that we have, they can see all of the challenges that we endure as individuals. But then they see that, wait a minute, we're still loving through it. We're still compassionate through it. We're still kind through it. We're still, patient, and all of those wonderful, beautiful 9 attributes of the Spirit. But we're not perfect, and we're not supposed to be. Perfection is like this. This is my understanding of it at this point. Perfection is like this. If I am a wood carver, if I am a person that loves to work with wood, and I make a beautiful table, well, if I start out with the raw material, I keep working with it. I keep working with it. I keep molding it, shaping it, carving it, sanding it, to the point to where I am perfecting it. I'm refining it so that it can come out this beautiful piece of artwork. That's what perfection means. It means growth in the character and the development of that craftsmanship, the development and the character and the refining and the honing and the fine-tuning of our lives to become love in the earth. That's my understanding of it at this point, and I'm loving it. Is it difficult sometimes? Of course it is, because we have an ego. The ego does not want to let go of control in our own lives, in our own way. It just doesn't want to let go of that bad boy. It just doesn't want to let go. It just says, no, Spirit, you're not leading my life. I have been programmed and conditioned through subconscious programming, through religion in my childhood, to believe that it's about my own survival. I mean, after all, God steps in once in a while, I cry out to him, kind of thing. God helps those who help themselves, mentality. And so I got to keep letting the ego run the show, even though I don't realize that it's ego running the show. It's all I've been used to. It's my paradigm. It's the way I live, and it's what I'm just programmed to do, to loop all the time, to just go in loops. And I wonder why I'm worn out. And then you come across a wonderful book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. Wonderful book, by the way. Get it on Amazon. It'll change your life. And then you come across something like that, and you're like, whoa, there's an even deeper level of this surrender thing and letting go. Then you start to live with no preferences. And then you're moved by the water of the Spirit. You're moved by the Spirit of God. You're moved non-religiously down the riverways of life, and he causes you to just kind of become like water, like Bruce Lee said, become water and pliable so that you can flow and move and have your being around these difficulties and challenges that will not take you under like the institution of religion would. Many times I've been depressed in the institution and didn't know why. Well, the demons were oppressing you, John. Well, dark, shadowy things exist, no doubt about it. But they're not omnipresent, and they're not omniscient like God is. Meaning they're not everywhere all at once, and they don't know everything all at once like God does. We give them way more power and way more credibility and way more of a lordship in our life than we should. I don't pay attention to dark things. I just cast forth the light so that the dark things dissipate and the light becomes love that takes over a person's perspective. And this is not through force, it's not through manipulation, it's just it permeates through their own egoic stuff to where they can see that they're made of the same substance of love that I am, right? It's a reciprocating thing because we're all one. We're all one in the spirit. So yeah, Amy and I, just wrapping it up, we've had quite the journey coming out of the whole institution, but we are so much better off for it. And we're not in trouble with God, as some may claim. In fact, like I said, we have awakened more than we could imagine, and we're loving the awakening because it's an ongoing thing. We're loving the love relationship that we have with each other and with God. We're enjoying the fact that he is for us. He loves us. He likes us. He likes hanging around you, and he loves hanging around me. He's not mad at you. He's not ready to cast you into the lake of fire. He's not ready to throw the gavel of judgment down on your head like some would say. He is always, always for you. So who in the world could be against you if you've got the God who created it all for you? My son has that tattooed on his back. If God is for me, who can be against me? Pretty amazing. It's true. That's a scripture. If God is for me, who can be against me? Now, it doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean you don't have flaws. It doesn't mean you're not still growing. It just means that God has the final say in your life. Not religion, not the institution of religion, not some bishop or priest or pastor somewhere. No, they're mere men and women just like you and I, and they're flawed individuals. And that's a beautiful thing in their own right because they have their own awakening to do. And if we just leave them alone to do it without judgment, then guess what? It releases something in the spirit energetically and spiritually for God to go rushing in and just start working in that manner. We hold up people's progress so much it's not even funny because we energetically hold them to a standstill because we keep a covering of judgmentalism or rescuism over their life to where the God of love in them is like trying to get through and gently knocking on their door of their soul and their woundedness and their ego saying, hey, I have a better way. You can choose. You have free will. I've given that to you. Do you want to go this way? I can make your life extremely good in so many ways if you would just surrender. Surrender Experiment. Michael Singer. Read it. It's a good one. And The Untethered Soul is another great one. All of his stuff is great. You can look at him up on YouTube. So good. And that's another thing, guys. Let me say something real quick before I wrap this up. There's so much more we can talk about. We'll do other videos, but when you're in the institution of religion, you're so afraid to go outside of that box because everyone's told you, especially the spiritual leaders, say, if you go outside of this box and you look at and you read this book or that book, or you go listen to this speaker and they don't claim to go to church, or they don't claim to know Jesus, or they don't claim to know God, then you're going to get deceived in a heartbeat. Can I just say that happens to some people who don't know who they are, but not the majority, I don't believe, because if you're earnestly, just have the right intentions in your heart and you're childlike and you're inquisitive, God is going to lead you on a path that will not look like religion. It will not. If you want to become completely authentic to who you are designed to be, who you're made to be, it's not going to stay in the four walls of the box. You're going to read the Bible and you're going to read other books that point to God that aren't of the Bible. You're going to read, you're going to hear messages and things that he'll lead you on. Let him lead you. Let him lead you. Let him guide you. Holy Spirit says he'll lead you and guide you into all truth. And truth is not relegated to one wonderful book. It's not. You can have a truth going to a gas station. You can have a truth going to your workplace. You can have a truth given to you by somebody that you would never even think or imagine. Say somebody with earrings and tattoos all over their body repulses you, which it used to me as well, which I was full of judgment, but it doesn't anymore. I just think it's artwork. That can repulse you, but what if God sent them to just come right up to you and give you a love bomb, a love message, not a narcissistic love bomb, but a real love bomb, and give you a message of hope? Could you receive that? Many that I knew in the religious world couldn't receive it because they think it's a demon speaking to them through this tattooed skin. It's the truth, guys. I know it's sickening, but it's the truth. I used to do it too. And what we do is we wrap God in a certain package and say he has to speak this way, he has to do this way, he has to share in a certain way, he has to love in a certain way, and he has to show up in a certain way. Thus, the Pharisees looking at Jesus showing up on a donkey and saying, "There's no way that could be the Messiah of the entire world. He's riding in on a jackass. Who is that? It's a false prophet." And that's what the religious spirit will do. That's what the Pharisaical mind will do. That's what the spiritual egoic realm will do, is it will point and label at things that may in fact be God riding in on that donkey. So anyway, that's a little of my story, a little of my journey coming out of the whole institution. Now, hey, community's great. If you love each other, you're empowering one another. People aren't sitting around getting jealous of your gifts, aren't competing and jockeying for one little position when there's millions of them and there's one recorded in heaven and planned out in the scroll of your being and the earth to do, designed just for you. There's no reason to be jealous or competitive. But once we become who we really are and begin to think and act like love and self on the inside of us, wow, you start really getting comfortable in your own skin. And then people look at you and they're like, "Oh man, there's something different about that person," because they're just being them. Yeah. What love will do for you is it'll cause you to settle right into your own authenticity and love every moment of it, the flaws and all, the triumphs, the victories, the empowerment, the beauty and the bigness of who you are, but also the frailty and the mistakes and the flaws. It's all good. It's all good because we're growing, we're learning, we're awakening. All right. Thank you for watching. And if you want to learn more, you can go to our site, paddlesup.fun. That's paddlesup.fun, just like it says on the screen right there. All right. We'll talk soon.